Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Mansi Shah, who serves as the curator for Colors of Classical Music, which we will learn a lot more about. Mansi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Oh, well, so I am so excited to be able to talk with you. Definitely want to learn, obviously, about Colors of Classical Music, and we're excited because this show has been curated with one of our creative partners, Newark Symphony Hall. So we're so excited about that. But your background and this work that you do is very, very unique, and I think has such interesting bearing on so many in our audience. And basically that is that you are both a flutist, a musician, but you are also a data scientist. And you have kind of brought these things together. And just wondering if you could share with us a little of the background of how that happened and how you kind of came to this interconnection.
Sure, yeah. I think I really found myself at this intersection really between three things, music, data, and environment, kind of by accident. I sort of just followed the things that I enjoyed. I always knew that I loved music. Ever since I was in school, I knew I wanted to go forward and study music. So that was sort of something I was pursuing. Then I started to get really interested in data through my work with environmental science. My undergraduate degree was in environmental science, and some work I did there sort of got me into data. And then I sort of realized that data is at the heart of everything. Like every single thing we do generates data. And in the case of classical music, especially at this point that we are now, when we're starting to address a lot of the underlying maybe racism and starting to become a little more anti-racist in the context of classical music, a big piece of that is the data that we both collect and also use to tell stories about ourselves and our own organizations. So it seemed like I was sort of already there at the intersection of the two. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll see where this goes, and I'm still definitely exploring it.
Well, it's really amazing, and especially intertwining the environment. It's amazing how the arts both are informed, obviously, by things such as data, but this impact that they can have in so many other areas of our lives. So, Colors of Classical Music, can you kind of share a little about that, and especially your role as curator?
Yeah, so Colors of Classical Music, I think at its heart is a community. It's a space for sharing and amplifying and centering musicians of color and their stories. And this is really, the purpose of this is really twofold. The first is to really provide a space for folks to come together and connect and share stories of hope, optimism, maybe fear, maybe talk about the things that are preventing us from getting to where we want to in our careers and problem solving that together. The second piece of it is really to raise awareness for a lot of in recent years, we've been becoming more aware of some of the anti-racism that's both anti-racist efforts and racism that's been at the heart of a lot of historical practices in classical music. And so to really raise awareness for what's happening and figure out how we can come together to move forward from that. As curator, I really, so these folks are out there, their stories are out there. I'm mostly just helping bring them to light and helping connect folks with other people who they can then go on to maybe continue collaborations with or sort of connect with. I see myself as a curator and also sort of like facilitator in this regard.
Gotcha, gotcha. And so, how does that ultimately manifest? So, what is your goal? Say there's, a musician who of color who has a story of where they have experienced bias, racism, et cetera. So then, how does that come through? So, and again, I'm kind of thinking as you share this kind of those in our audiences who might be like, oh my gosh, this is, really, we'd like to see how we might be able to emulate or replicate this. So kind of, could you walk us through a little of then that process of what would happen for that musician?
Yeah, so I either folks reach out to me through the page saying like, "Hey, I have this experience I'd like to share," and just to sort of clarify, they're not always negative experiences of sort of like the bias and prejudice that people have faced. Some of them are how people, despite all of these circumstances, have gone forward and are building really successful, beautiful careers for themselves. So they're not sort of all negative. Um, but either I reach out to them or they reach out to me. We sort of have a conversation. They write down their story in like a written format. These posts are on Instagram, so I'm a little bit limited in like the word count and all that stuff. And then they're posted, and then they serve as really a space for dialogue and conversation, both with people who are supportive, who are like, we see you, we see where you're at, we want to support you, and then also, I think it serves as a place for dialogue for people who maybe aren't as much aware or aren't as familiar with what's going on. And it's a space to start that conversation and talk about, well, hey, here are these examples of things happening. How can we acknowledge these experiences that people are having and then also learn from them so that we make sure that they don't happen again?
Absolutely, which is so critically important. And also I love utilizing obviously not just social media, but especially Instagram, and capturing, I think probably a community that you might not be able to capture if you weren't bringing this to the social media space. Do you find that? And do you have a focus at all in terms of kind of any demographics or age groups that you're focused on?
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess with Instagram, the age group tends to, I guess, skew a little bit lower, just given the fact that it's a social media site. I think this was also critical during the pandemic because this is really when it started. The page was created sort of at the heart of the pandemic. Um, the catalyst for it, I was thinking through and working on a lot of these things for several months and a few years sort of before. But I think the catalyst for really creating the page and making it a concrete thing was the murder of George Floyd, like right during the heart of the pandemic. And so I think because of that virtual nature of everything at the time, it was a really powerful way to connect with people, not just in the all over the U.S. and the country, but globally. And so right now, Colors of Classical Music is a global community. We have about, I think, a little less than 5,000 followers on Instagram and a little more than 100 posts so far, and still counting.
Awesome, awesome. And that's so important. And I obviously encourage anyone in our audience, which is global, to definitely check out Mansi's site as well as Instagram. Is there a best way for the audience to be able to find this information and find you?
Um, that's a good question. I think if you just Google Colors of Classical Music, there's also a Facebook page for those who don't have Instagram. And then for anyone who would like to submit a story, please send them in. We're always accepting new stories. In the Instagram link in the bio, there should be another link that will take you to a form that has more information about how the whole process works.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. So, of course, I'm because of what you shared about kind of some of your data background and all of that, I'm kind of thinking of, how this intertwines and kind of, say 5 years from now, as you look back on this project, if it's, been the full success that you would want it to be, um, is what will have happened. And as part of that, I'm curious, is there any data that will be known from these stories that you think could be applicable, not just within the arts world, but potentially beyond the arts world at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, all right, so I'd say if I were to maybe in a few years from now, um, right now the effort is still largely virtual, focused through online efforts and reaching out to people there. I am, however, working on transitioning this into more of a hybrid model now that we're sort of stepping, I really hope, outside the pandemic and a little more freedom there. I'm looking forward to bringing this into other channels, maybe more in-person channels. And I've had the chance to do a little bit of this. So last year, well, I guess this is still more virtual, but you mentioned Newark Symphony Hall earlier. We had the chance last year to co-host a community town hall where members of the Colors of Classical Music community came together, and we had a chance to just talk. Like it was a couple hours. People could voice their hopes, their dreams, their fears, maybe their concerns about what is next for the classical music community and how can we really strengthen what we have. And then coming up with, solutions or ideas of things we can do to really continue to make a difference, especially for artists of color. So that was a really cool thing, and I hope to do more of those kinds of things, either virtual or in person. Another highlight, I think, of last year, a couple other things actually that I would love to sort of do more of. I had the chance last year to, I was invited to give a talk at Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania about this sort of tie between data and music. And that was super valuable because the folks I talked to really hadn't heard of this combination of like, whoa, what does data have anything to do with music? And so to talk to folks and then to really have them think about how these same principles can be applied in their own work, like how they can think about the kind of data they collect, if they collect any, or to maybe start collecting data about their ensembles or organizations, things like that. And then also how that data is used in things like the grant writing process or other sort of documentation, and to really be more mindful of that. And then also, I guess at the heart of things, I am also still a musician in addition to all of this like arts advocacy work that I do. So that's a big piece of it. Last year, I also had the opportunity to co-present a concert with through Colors of Classical Music with Asian Musical Voices of America and Protestra, which are two really incredible organizations doing really good work to raise awareness about some of these issues that we're facing in our field. And that concert was for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And the entire concert, many of the musicians were Asian identifying. Many of the composers whose music was played were also Asian identifying. And the concert raised money for two Asian-led local nonprofits in New York City. So that was just an incredible experience that brought together all these things, not only in sort of theory and like in a virtual way, but a very tangible way that folks who attended that concert or watched it online virtually really, took some things home with them that they could sort of digest and think about how to implement in their own lives.
Such important work. And I love how what definitely wove through everything you shared was these collaborations, partnerships, and how you can totally achieve so much more when you join with others, whether it's Newark Symphony Hall or other organizations. So really, really extraordinary work. So unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask my guests who are all these amazing leaders. And I feel like we can all learn so much from you. And wondering in terms of your leadership approach on tough days when it's seems like somehow, right, the work's not happening right, or there's some challenges that you might not be able to overcome. What do you draw upon for strength, for inspiration during the toughest of times as a leader?
That's a great question. I would have to say I first sort of look internally, take some time to reflect. Whenever I'm not sure of something or I'm facing a bit of hardship, I always want to make sure that what I'm doing is aligned with my own purpose and the purpose of whatever I'm doing, if whether it's Colors of Classical Music or something else. So I think that internal alignment is really important. Then I have an incredible community. I'm so lucky to have an incredible community of friends, of family, of mentors, many of which actually I've met through Colors of Classical Music. So in connecting with them there, they've become friends and mentors of people that I can sort of go to bounce ideas off of. And I'd say the community at large has been really inspiring. There have been days when I am working on posts for the page or doing something else, and I wonder, is this really impactful? Like, is this meaningful? Do people find value in this? And then almost every time I get messages from people, emails or messages where people are like, I was considering not pursuing music as a career, or I was thinking about dropping out of my master's program because there have been so many things that have been difficult, things like that. And I saw your page, and it's really inspired me to keep going. And there are people here that I can reach out for help. So thank you. And stories like that just continue to inspire me. Even if I can help one person sort of meet their goals or continue to follow their dreams, that's enough for me.
Mansi Shah, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Aaron.